Hey everyone. I need to be honest with you. For a long time, my faith was a comfort, a beautiful and gentle guide in my life. It was a foundation I never questioned. But then the storms came, the kind of storms that rattle you to your very core. My world was shaken. And for the first time, I looked at the cross and I didn't see salvation. I saw a paradox. I saw a mystery. And in that moment, a terrifying, audacious thought entered my mind. I decided to do something that felt like a betrayal of everything I had ever believed in. I set out to prove that God did not exist. You see, I was tired of faith that felt like a fragile glass vase, beautiful but easily shattered. I wanted something more. I wanted an ironclad, unshakable truth, or I wanted nothing at all. So I did what any man of science and logic would do. I started with Jesus, the very center of our faith. I thought, if I can find the cracks, the inconsistencies, the things that just don't add up, then the whole story, the entire grand narrative, must fall. My journey began in the most obvious place, the historical records. We've all heard the arguments. Jesus wasn't real. He was a myth, a folktale, an amalgamation of different pagan gods. I dove headfirst into these theories, spending countless nights sifting through ancient texts and scholarly papers. I was ready to find the definitive proof that he was a legend, a great storyteller, but not the Son of God. And the more I read, the more I was confronted with something absolutely astonishing. The evidence for his existence is overwhelming. I couldn't believe it. Roman and Jewish historians, men who had no reason to speak kindly of him, wrote about him. Tacitus, Josephus, Pliny the Younger, they all mentioned Jesus, his followers, and his death by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. They hated him, they reviled him, yet they couldn't erase him from history. But then, a new question emerged, one far more mysterious and compelling. If he was so real, if his story was so powerful, why is the historical record so strange? Think about it. The most influential man to ever walk the earth, and yet there are these massive, perplexing silences in the historical records outside the Gospels. No Roman account of the sun turning black, no detailed record of the earthquake. Was it all just a lie? Was this the crack I was looking for? It was baffling. But my search wasn't just about the records. I started looking at the men who wrote the Gospels. What was their motivation? Why did they write what they wrote? The critics argued that they were biased, trying to craft a story that would serve their own purposes. And at first that made perfect sense, but then I looked at their lives. I looked at what they did after they wrote those words. They were tortured, they were imprisoned, they were crucified upside down, they were hunted and killed for a belief they had no reason to uphold if it was all a lie. You don't die a gruesome death for a myth you invented. And that's when the true mystery of the Gospels began to reveal itself. I was chasing the wrong questions. The real mystery wasn't the lack of evidence for Jesus, but the shocking, undeniable impact he had on his followers. What was it that made these men, these simple fishermen and tax collectors, so utterly convinced that they would willingly face the most horrific deaths imaginable? Something happened. Something truly profound happened after that tomb was empty. If you're searching for answers like I was, if you're wrestling with your own doubts, please don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey, because the truth I found was not what I expected. The deeper I dug into the evidence for God's non-existence, the more the shadows fell away and the more something else, something far, far greater, began to shine through. So I had a choice to make. I could accept that Jesus was a historical figure and the apostles were crazy fanatics, or I could admit that my simple search for historical cracks was leading me down a rabbit hole of even bigger, more profound mysteries. I chose the latter. My quest to disprove God wasn't over, it had just begun, and the next frontier was the most painful one, the problem of evil. This is the big one, isn't it? The question that keeps countless brilliant minds up at night. If God is all good and all powerful, why does he allow suffering? Why does he stand by silently while children starve? Why does he permit the kind of evil that brings empires to their knees? I started reading the great theological and philosophical works, fully expecting to find a satisfactory answer, a neat little bow to tie around the concept of a benevolent God. I was looking for the flaw in the divine logic, the moment where God's power and goodness just couldn't coexist. I read about the Holocaust, the genocides, the senseless natural disasters, and my heart broke. I was convinced. This was it. This was it. This was the proof. How could an all-loving father watch as 6 million of his chosen people were slaughtered? How could he remain silent during the Black Death, which wiped out half of Europe? It seemed impossible. There could be no God, not a good one anyway. And the more I read, the more I felt a terrible emptiness. It was as if I was standing alone in a dark, silent room, screaming into the void, and no one was answering. But then I did something different. Instead of looking at the suffering of the world as proof of God's absence, I looked at it through the lens of Jesus' suffering. And that changed everything. The silence I was so angry about, the quiet from a seemingly distant God. I realized it wasn't a flaw in his character. It was the deepest, most incomprehensible act of love imaginable. Think about it. We see a God who allows suffering. The logical conclusion is that he doesn't care. But the story of Jesus gives us a completely different conclusion. In Jesus, God didn't just watch our suffering, he entered into it. He became a human being, a man of sorrows, familiar with grief. He was born into poverty, he was rejected, he was betrayed by his closest friends. He felt the pain of injustice and abandonment. He was not only present, but he became a part of the pain. And here's the thing that absolutely captivated my mind and my heart. The crucifixion. The Roman and Jewish records tell us he was crucified. We know the torture he endured. He was beaten, mocked, and nailed to a cross. But the Gospels reveal something even more shocking. The moment Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" What happened there? Was God absent? Was God turning away? For a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed that God the Father had to separate himself from God the Son. He felt what it was like to be without God. In that moment of ultimate darkness, Jesus experienced the ultimate suffering, the isolation and brokenness of being utterly alone. This was not a proof of God's non-existence. This was a completely new, far more profound kind of proof. It's the proof of a God who loves us so much that he would not only endure our pain, but become the very embodiment of it. He didn't just feel our pain from a safe distance. He became the very thing that we fear most. And that is a love that goes beyond all logic and all comprehension. My search had taken a thrilling turn. I was no longer trying to find evidence against God. I was trying to understand the incredible, almost unbelievable mystery of his love. I was starting to see that the greatest proofs of God's existence aren't found in a simple logical argument. They're found in the paradoxes, in the moments of deepest darkness and suffering. I know this is a lot to take in. My journey is far from over. There's so much more I want to share with you, so many more questions I had, and so many more answers I found. If you've been on a similar journey, please let me know in the comments. And if you're not yet a part of this community, consider subscribing. Because in the final part of this journey, I'm going to share with you how the greatest paradox of all led me to the most unshakable, personal, and awe-inspiring proof of God's existence I could ever have imagined. My journey began with a desperate attempt to find the cracks in the foundation of my faith. I wanted to prove God didn't exist. I was tired of a faith that felt weak, a faith that couldn't withstand the storms of life. And I have to tell you, I found those cracks. I found the logical contradictions, the historical silences, the overwhelming evidence of evil and suffering in this world. But what I discovered in those cracks wasn't a gaping chasm of nothingness. Instead, I found something far more powerful. I found the fingerprints of a love so big, so mysterious, so incomprehensible that it had to be divine. I realized that the problem of evil isn't a problem for God. It's a problem for our own limited understanding of him. We want a God who fits into a neat little box, a God who prevents suffering and makes everything easy. But Jesus shows us a different God, a God who doesn't just intervene from the outside, but one who transforms from the inside. He turns suffering into sacrifice, pain into purpose, and death into resurrection. The silence of God that I wrestled with wasn't proof of his absence. It was a testament to his respect for our freedom. He created us with the capacity to love, but true love cannot be forced. It must be chosen. He allows us to make our own choices, even bad ones, because he respects our autonomy, a respect so profound that he would rather experience the pain of our choices than force us to be puppets on a string. And that That is a love that truly deserves our worship. So, where did my journey lead me? To a place I never expected. I set out to prove God did not exist. And in doing so, I found a God I could no longer disprove. The proof wasn't in a flawless logical argument. It was in the paradoxes. It was in the historical Jesus who was too real to be a myth and too perfect to be just a man. It was in the silence of a God who chose to break his silence by becoming one of us and dying for us. It was in the suffering of a world that is not a testament to God's absence, but a call to action for his children to be his hands and feet. I didn't find the proof I was looking for. I didn't find a way to argue God out of existence, but what I found was so much better. I found a personal, profound, and utterly unshakable faith. My faith is no longer a fragile vase. It is an iron fortress, a fortress built on a foundation of questions, doubts, and paradoxes. Because the truth is, a God who can withstand every question is a God worth believing in. This journey taught me that doubt isn't the enemy of faith. It's the doorway to a deeper faith. It's the catalyst that forces you to move from believing in a God of convenience to a God of conviction. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If you found something meaningful here, I'd be so honored if you would subscribe and join our community, because this is just the beginning. I can't wait to share more with you about the beautiful, mysterious, and utterly wonderful God I found in the shadows of my own doubts. May your search for truth always lead you to a deeper understanding of his perfect love.